Here's what I see before I turn the lights on in my shop. Good morning, this is Doug with Design 8 Studio, and I hope you can hear me over the logging operation that's happening near my house. We are working on installing our 48-inch Magnabend electromagnetic sheet metal brake that has arrived, and I first saw this tool in use on the clow42.com YouTube channel. And just like he did, I wanted to put some heavy-duty casters on the bottom of mine. And so I'm about to drill for being able to mount those casters. Drilling wasn't necessary on 2 of the 4 legs because they were made to be bolted to a floor, so they had large bolt holes already drilled in them. But 2 of the legs were meant to be kind of leveling options, and they will need to be drilled. So luckily I've been able to set the base with the legs on it on the shipping crate, the wooden box that the Magnabend came in, and adjust my drill press while placing it on the floor to the right height. So I'm just about to do that drilling, and I'll try to point the camera at it and follow along for you. So here you can see on the floor where I've unloaded the big Magnabend out from under the shipping crate, and here I have the base. I've already attached the legs to the base, and I mentioned to you that the front legs already came with holes pre-drilled for bolting the legs to the floor. So those I was able to mount the heavy-duty casters on with no problem. But the back legs had this leveling feature. They had a nut and bolt set that allowed you to screw the bolt down, and underneath that is a little plate, a little steel plate that is welded on only at the back further up, and the front of the plate can be pushed down. The force of the bolt can push the plate, and it serves as a leveling feature. So I've got to drill not only through the hole for the bolt, but I've also got to drill through the metal plate that's underneath that. So I've got my drill press on the floor already, and I'm using the crate to actually hold this up while I go to drill it. The studs for this thing are, I think, probably would be classed as M12. With my calipers, they measure at 11.5 millimeters. So my 1/2-inch drill bit, the largest one that I have in my set, is slightly oversized but big enough, and the next drill bit down is too small. So we'll be using the 1/2-inch drill bit to drill this out. Okay, one down. Just got to do that for one more. Okay, with that step done, we'll clean up and put in the studs and mount those last two heavy-duty casters. So this is the heavy-duty caster that I'm using, and it's both a swivel and has a leveling leg feature, so it can serve as a stationary locked item or as a mobile item. Okay, so just one more of those to mount, and I'll have this thing ready to bolt the stand onto the main body of the tool. Forgive me for working off camera, but I got help. This is a two-man lift. Got the main unit lifted up and put onto the base. We've got everything screwed together and bolted in. And so the last thing is that I need to get a plug for the power cord. They ship the power cord without a plug because different people around the world use different kinds of plugs. So I've got a plug on order, and as soon as I get a plug attached to it, I'll be able to do some test bends to show you a little bit of this machine in action. As I've shown in earlier videos, I built a plasma cutting rig using a Lowrider 3 as the motion control system and Linux CNC as the CNC control software. And this is a little bit of footage of me cutting a project that a friend commissioned me to cut, but it is the addition to my shop of this tool that I built using free open source plans and free open source software that has really spurred me to go ahead and spend the money on the Magnabend. And so this is an exciting tool that opens up all kinds of artistic and creative possibilities, as well as utilitarian possibilities for creating functional parts and tools. And so that's why I went ahead and sunk the money into buying this tool. I should mention also that ever since the patent expired and the inventor of the Magnabend is no longer directly profiting from it, he opened up the plans for it and made it publicly available to all. And somewhere along the way, a Chinese manufacturer began producing the product. Now, in my research, I have discovered that all of the American vendors that you might want to buy this product from are not manufacturing it, but rather they're simply importing it from the Chinese manufacturer. And so, since I could not buy American-made, but rather only buy Chinese-made that was being imported by American companies, I just skipped the middleman and ordered the Magnabend straight from the company that makes it for the American companies. And so I wish that wasn't the situation, but that is the situation. So just wanted to explain that briefly. Okay, let's get on to the attaching of the plug to the Magnabend so we can get to the testing for you. Okay, so the plug that I ordered came in, and in this particular plug calls for the wires to go in through holes and then screws to tighten down on them. And it's always preferred to put a ferrule onto the end of the raw wire as opposed to clamping down on the wire itself. It's better to clamp down on the ferrule. Use the wire cutters to get all three wires to the same length, then use the wire strippers to get just enough bare wire exposed for the barrel end of the ferrule. And then link in the description for that, link in the description for the ferrules. And then using this crimper tool, which is one of the neatest inventions, you can press the barrel of the ferrule onto the wire. And forgive me, I did that off camera. This particular wire, I'm guessing was about 14 gauge, and the 14 gauge is what I used. The 14 is denoted there. That's what I used for stripping the wires. And then the blue is denoted in the package as being for 14 gauge wire, and that again seemed like a perfect fit. So I used the blue ferrules. And so, again, forgive me, I did it off camera, but all three of these wires, and this is single phase 220, so the black and the white wires are both going to be hot with somewhere between 110 to 120 or more volts, and the green is the ground. And each one is inserted in, and then the screw is tightened down on it. Be sure to put this in place on the back of the cord before you insert the front, and then this is simply tightened down on with two screws here once it's in place. But before that, you bring this up, and you'll notice there are little screw holes in there, and those line up with these two screws here. And so once all of that is lined up, you're able to bring this together and then tighten this up right here. And these screws have an amazing steep pitch on their threads, and they go in with a rather amazing speed. And so that's how we're getting our plug buttoned up on our 1250E Magnabend. Two more quick tips regarding the installation of this plug. There are different plugs and different outlet configurations for different voltages and different types. This particular one with the grounding plug at one end and then a vertical and a sideways, that is single phase 220. It's impossible for this plug to be inserted into a 110 socket. Each different configuration of electrical application has its own designated plug and outlet. So if you've ever seen some crazy looking plug and wondered why, it's because it was made to signify a different application. By the way, each different electrical application, each different voltage in the wall has a different wiring that is designated for it. So check the charts and install the right wiring. By the way, that also means that, for example, if you've got wiring that the best it can serve for is 110 volts, you shouldn't be putting an outlet on that wiring that wrongfully, deceptively communicates that that wiring is beefier than it is. The final point I'll make here is that when you go to clamp the back down onto the cord, be sure that those clamps are biting onto this external sheathing, this external insulation, as opposed to just those the wires inside of it. we've got this all ready to plug in, and next up, we'll hopefully be able to show you some bending taking place. So one last thing to mention, and that is that if you don't have single-phase 220 in your shop for powering, for example, the Magnabend or your plasma torch, then you can buy a step-up, step-down transformer. And I shopped carefully and ordered this one on AliExpress. And this box brings 110 into the back and brings 220 out the front. 110 in the back, 220 out the front. It does this by the magic of coils, and electronic engineers know how it works. And I listen to them and trust their guidance, and they don't steer me wrong. So this is easier and faster and cheaper for me than trying to run a new line of 220 for my breaker box all the way across my whole house to get to where I need it on the other end of my shop. So step up, step down transformer. Okay, so I've got some scrap 18 gauge metal, and 18 gauge is, I think, 0.048 inches thick, which is about 1.1 millimeters thick. And this really little narrow flange on the end, just kind of as a torture test. I'm going to try to see if it can grab a hold of the back half of this tiny flange and fold the front half, which if it can, I'm going to be super impressed. But this thing is supposed to be able to hold with, I think, 6 tons of clamping force. So there we go. I've got a really narrow flange of 18 gauge steel. I think 16 gauge is the most this thing is rated for bending. So we need to flip it into bending mode, and then to ensure hands-free, no danger of your fingers being in the way, you either have to engage this thing with the green buttons, or you can use the foot panel. I'm keeping my hands well free. I'm using the foot panel, and it's now engaged electromagnetically. I'm now releasing it. And I am super impressed. I am super impressed. That thing held on. It held on to that tiny flange and bent that tiny flange of 18 gauge steel. It held on to that tiny lip at the back and bent the front lip of that 18 gauge steel. So I'm super impressed. This thing is really amazing, and I hope to bring you more on this in days to come. Hi, this is Doug Joseph with Design 8 Studio. If you like our content, please click like and subscribe. It helps us with the YouTube algorithm. And until the next video, I wish you happy making.